Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Raven, who is also Brooke, and in today's video, I will be discussing Dance Moms and how it was a scripted show and very much manipulated. Now, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and to follow me on all my social media platforms, and remember that this is my opinion.
That's my opinion!
And usually I would say nothing in this video I'm saying is facts, but I am using facts in this video, so let's just get right into it. So Dance Moms premiered July 13th, 2011, and the show became an idea because one of the creators, John Corella, who was also Mr. Dance of America, he knew the whole world of dance and how chaotic and crazy it could be, especially because of the moms. He then went to another producer named Brian Stinson, who then went to Jeff Collins, who was an executive producer at Lifetime. And also Jeff Collins ended up being the executive producer of Dance Moms. Now, the idea of the show was to be a crossover of Toddlers and Tiaras mixed with The Real Housewives, and it really mainly was supposed to be about the moms and just what it is to be a dance mom, what that life is about, how many hours go into it, and etc, etc. And originally the show was just supposed to be like a 6-week docuseries. It wasn't supposed to turn into the phenomenon that we now know as Dance Moms. Now, while they kept doing casting calls, they were noticing that the moms that they liked were coming from the same studio, the Abby Lee Dance Company, that was owned by Abby Lee Miller, who famously says that she has owned that studio since she was 14 because her mom was also a dance teacher. Now, the cast of Dance Moms in season 1 ended up being Chloe and her mom Christy, Nia and her mom Holly, Maddie and Mackenzie alongside their mom Melissa, Brooke and Paige alongside their mom Kelly, and also a cast member who came in season 2 also ended up being very popular was Kendall and her mom Jill. We all know, my little Kendall, that Jill. And also what's interesting is at first, Abby was just cast as a choreographer. She was not supposed to be a cast member, a part of the show, not even a focal point of the show. But there's a scene that happened on that first airing of the first episode where Abby called the police on a dance mom named Dawn, and then she ended up, because Dawn was mad that her daughter wasn't allowed to dance because she didn't have the proper shoes on, and the producers immediately were like, we have to get Abby onto the show. So once the producers saw how successful the show could become, they put the moms in a horrible 4-year contracts where they weren't getting that much pay. However, their dance lessons were being covered and their dance tuition. And also in Dance Moms, what became very infamous was the pyramid, which we will get into later. And also they went to a competition every week, and that was just the premise of the show. There was the pyramid, they went to a competition every week, and there would be dramas between the moms and the moms with Abby. The premise was them wanting to get their kids ahead in dance, so that was just the whole plot of the show. Now, the cast became household names in America literally overnight. I started watching Dance Moms when I was 10 years old, and I just remember, because I was a cheerleader at the time, but just watching Dance Moms made me really want to be like, damn, I wish I could be a dancer, because it genuinely seemed so intriguing. I used to love the dances that they did. I remember one dance that literally shocked me as a child. I think it was the season 3 finale, where it was them getting into a car accident, and then all of them ended up dying, and it was just oh my god. I remember always trying to mimic the types of moves they were doing. I remember I tried to learn an aerial because of them and a front aerial because of them. So they were literally household names in America once the show premiered. They were in music videos, they were on talk shows, they were on a bunch of red carpets, and even when they went to dance competitions, and I'm not sure if this is technically scripted or not, if producers told audience members to do this, but when they would come to competitions, you would always see the other dancers of the competitions or just attendees waiting for their bus to come so they can greet them, and just very much giving fan behavior, try to get pictures with them. And again, it may have been allegedly scripted, because how would they know when their bus is coming? But also, again, I don't doubt that people really did try to wait to when they were coming to get pictures with them or of them. Now, like I said, all the girls pretty much became household names overnight, but I'm pretty sure the name that everyone thinks of when they think of the most famous is Maddie, because Maddie ended up being in the very infamous music video Chandelier by Sia, and she pretty much worked with Sia a lot as a preteen and a teen, and was in a lot of projects with Sia. I remember she was also in that controversial video with Shia LaBeouf for the song Elastic Heart, and then she was also in another controversial movie that Sia actually created where she played an autistic girl, and this movie was called Music back in 2021. And also in the show, which we'll get into later, she was seen as Maddie's favorite. The audience could see it, the mom moms felt it, and it pretty much was a storyline that kept being pushed, especially because the producers knew that it would agitate the moms, which meant that there would be more drama. Then there's a spin-off of the show called Abby's Ultimate Dance Competition, where Abby actually found future cast members including Kalani and her mom Kira, and also JoJo Siwa and her mom Jesslyn. And Kalani would join in season 4, and then JoJo would become a cast member in season 5. And then there's another spin-off where Abby would go to different dance studios and fix up their studios. And then there's a Dance Mom spin-off called Dance Moms Miami, which I actually liked and I actually did love, but unfortunately it was canceled after 1 season. And also Abby ended up opening a studio in LA, so she was running an LA studio as well as her Pittsburgh studio to help expand the Abby Lee Dance Company. And again, there are a lot of cast members who joined who weren't even really main cast members who became very big. Like I said, Maddie was one of them. Chloe actually became very big in her own right, especially after she left the show in season 4. Ava Michelle, who was also in the show in season 4 when Abby tried to create another competition dance team to compete against her own junior elite dance team. And then also again, JoJo Siwa, she became a very big child star. Now for the first 3 seasons, Dance Moms hit a peak of viewership at 2.8 million, which was in its season 3 premiere. But then after season 4 and after some very prominent cast members left the show, which I'll get into later, its viewership did drop from those seasons going forward. Now, I believe that the fall of Dance Moms started when people began to see how atrocious Abby's behavior was to these kids, not just their parents. For example, Abby and Kelly actually have real life history with each other because Kelly used to dance for Abby back when she was a teenager. And in the show, they were always saying how Kelly would have been like such a good, dancer if only she would have applied herself. And then they tried to draw a parallel with her daughter Brooke because they always portrayed Brooke as never really caring for dance and never having a passion for it. And Abby, I guess, resented Kelly for a lot of those things. And then I remember at the season 2 reunion, it got very personal when Abby, was claiming that Kelly stole one of her boyfriends and kissed a guy that she liked. So there was just a lot of personal history that they had between each other. And in return, in my opinion, that's why Abby treated Paige and Brooke the way that she did, especially to Paige. She used to literally yell at Paige just in her face all the time. There was a scene where, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but this scene just adds context to how mean Abby was to them. But basically, it was a solo that Paige had, and it was a chair prop that she had, and the producers told Kelly she leaves a chair at the studio, they'll put the stoppers under it that Abby wanted. But then Kelly came to the studio and the producers never did it, and Kelly speculates that was so there could be tension between her and Abby. So then when Abby got mad that there were no stoppers on the chair and Paige was in the room, she started yelling at Kelly, and then she kind of tossed the chair.
Something. Done. You, Abby. You don't need him for the competition. I told you to do it for today. Look at that language. Doesn't that embarrass you? That she has to use language like that?
Literally where Paige was, and it just was not a good look at all. It was very rude. You're a grown-ass woman, you need to calm down. I understand this is TV and the situation was manipulated, but that's absolutely insane and not right. And also Abby would talk about other kids, and I'm going to go into details about that when I get into the problematic ways of Dance Moms. But Abby would literally talk about kids to their face, which is again absolutely insane. You're a grown-ass woman. This shit can be heavily edited and not scripted, but it was very much manufactured in a way. But still, you're a grown woman who has control of yourself. An ounce of you has to feel bad. Now the big a big chunk of the fall of Dance Moms was when Abby was charged in 2015 with bankruptcy fraud and not reporting an international monetary transaction that people allege happened in Australia. And if you remember, I believe it was season 6 when they went to Australia to perform. They're saying that that's when Abby did this alleged crime. Now for the bankruptcy charge, this came about because she was accused of hiding $750,000 she earned from the Ultimate Dance show and through other sources of income to hide her income after she filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And then in 2016, she did end up pleading guilty to the bankruptcy charge and was sentenced to federal prison for a year and 1 day. And then after she would be released, she would have 2 years of supervision. Now this was just the straw that broke the camel's back. So after, Abby was released from prison, there actually was another season of Dance Moms that aired back in 2019, which was season 8, that did have a whole new cast, but there were 2 returning cast members, Eliana and Liliana, who was on Dance Moms the last 2 seasons on that mini team that Abby created when she was in LA. Now, back in 2020, of course, everyone knows about the of George Floyd, and I would say that was a time when a lot of celebrities were definitely being very performative. And I don't want to get off topic, but I say at this time, a lot of celebrities were better off being quiet, because it ended up exposing a lot of them, including Abby. Because back in 2020, there was actually going to be a web show surrounding Dance Moms that was going to be its 9th season. So former cast member Adriana Smith, whose daughter danced with Abby and her name was Cameron, she accused Abby of saying a lot of racial things after Abby posted a black square on a blackout Tuesday that Instagram was having, which again was very performative, because it's what the fuck is a black? Anyways, so a statement that Adriana said is, a statement from Miller that sticks in my mind to this day on my time during Dance Mom season 8 is when Abby said, I knew you grew up in the hood with only a box of 8 crayons, but I grew up in the country club with a box of 64. Don't be stupid. Excuse me? And I'm going to get more into Abby's racist and racial insensitivity ways that she has when I talk about the problematic, things that Dance Moms did. But that's actually insane. And also Cameron, who joined in the last season of season 7, and her mom Camille, they also came out when that square was posted by Abby, saying that Abby definitely had a lot of racial insensitivities to her and was just borderline racist in general. And after this news came out, Lifetime just ended up canceling Dance Mom season 9. And also something else that I forgot to mention, which is very important, that includes the fall of Dance Moms. Kelly, alongside Paige, actually ended up suing the production company that was in charge of Dance Moms, as well as Abby. Now, in this lawsuit, Kelly sued for $5 million, and it was a defamation lawsuit. And in this lawsuit, Kelly argued that Dance Moms made her look like a drunk, a bad mother, and other untrue likeliness courtesy of Abby's scathing commentary. And also Paige did try to sue Abby for emotional distress, but unfortunately the judge did throw that away, saying that they contributed it to just having normal teenage emotions, which is did you not see the show? Abby was definitely emotionally and verbally abusive to these kids, especially if she did not like your mom. Kelly also alleged that her and her daughters were owed money by the producers, and she was also seeking to recoup money after floors in her house were damaged during filming. But then all parties had settled out of court. Kelly agreed to drop her suit, and also the production company had to replace Kelly's wood floors for $17,500. And Dance Moms was still able to use the likeliness of Kelly, Brooke, and Paige, but they were obligated to pay them to use their likeliness even though they were off the show. Now let's get into the problematic ways of Dance Moms. Now, for one, again, I just mentioned earlier that Abby was very much verbally and emotionally abusive to these kids, but Abby used to, again, literally body shame them, talk about their features to their face. For example, in the season 4 finale, when Chloe ended up leaving, they edited out a part where Abby actually talked about Chloe's eye, where she did have an actual condition, and they made it seem like Abby just called her washed up, and that's why Christy ended up getting angry. But no, Abby literally talked about Chloe's eye, where she had a whole medical condition. And then there's a scene where Abby ended up talking about one of Kathy's, again, who was a rival of Abby, who was a part of the Candy Apple dance company, where she talked about one of the dancers' ears, again, to the dancer's face, telling her that she needs to get it fixed. When it comes to the cast member Ava, she would talk about Ava's, features of being really tall and being really skinny. And also with Cameron, and this also goes into, again, a lot of racist and racially insensitive things that Abby used to say. So Cameron, in a video where she talks about her time on Dance Mom, said that Abby used to always question her about why the bottom of her feet were white. When it comes to Nia, Abby would put her in so many dances that were so racially charged and motivated. For example, the dance that comes to mind is the Laquifa dance. Now, one could say there's nothing wrong with Abby giving Nia a lot of roles. That, for example, she did a role where she was Maya Angelou, which was also a very good solo. She had Nia play Rosa Parks, and it was that infamous episode where Jill got mad because she wanted Kendall to be Rosa Parks. And then even when you would see, like, she always just counted Nia out, like always. And even in season 1, she talked about Nia's hair when she had braids in, talking about what is this over here trying to touch it. Like, I just hated the way she treated Nia. She always counted her out because Nia to me was actually a very great dancer, especially in like season 7. You really saw the growth in her, and she even, I believe, won at nationals in that finale. So she always just counted Nia out and just gave her very stereotypical roles, which again, some can see as her trying to show homage. But again, if you read between the lines and the things that Abby has said to other Black cast members, it doesn't come off as if she wanted Nia to do this for homage. It just came very much like, oh, like, you technically, I should be giving you a role like this, or it just came off very racially insensitive to me, if you disagree. And then also she would talk about, you know, saying how dancers were horrible, and she would just say that to their face, like literally to their face. She would talk about how they're a horrible dancer. Like, what? And then she will also talk about the mom's personal life and say very personal things, again, in front of the kids. And I can only imagine how traumatic just this whole experience was. Well, a lot of them had talked about how it was traumatic to just be in an environment where it was just screaming and yelling, and a lot of personal things were being said all the time. And all this is being said by your dance teacher, someone that you're supposed to see as a leader, as a role model, not this person who just torments your life. Another problematic thing is how the girls were in very disastrous working conditions. A lot of the moms talk about how the girls would literally come from school and then start filming from like 4 p.m. all the way to midnight. Just had to do that basically 6 days a week, and the only time they had off was the day after a competition. And then a lot of the girls just ended up becoming homeschooled because that just made the whole process easier. And even the contracts they were in were just god awful. Like, it literally would have been hard as hell to get out of that 4-year contract they had them locked into. And just even talking about the problematic ways of dance moms, it's unfortunate that all of this was really affecting the kids. Like, I'm really not talking about anything that like affected the adults. I'm talking about things that literally affected them as kids. They were the main stars of the show. The show wouldn't have been anything without them. Now, why I'm titling this video of how dance moms expose reality TV and just how manufactured it can be is because after Dance Moms aired, a lot of the cast members and a lot of the moms, and Abby included, started talking about just how manufactured that show was. Like, no, it technically wasn't scripted, but it was so heavily edited and heavily manipulated that it's actually scary to think about when you like go back and like, say if you were on YouTube and you're watching like the Lifetime compilations, like even when you watch it, you can really tell when they edited stuff into that show to make it seem like a way that it wasn't. For example, let's talk about some scenes that were heavily edited. So in season 6, it's a scene of Kira getting mad at Ashley, quote unquote, and she's throwing a water bottle. But it's revealed that Kira actually was getting mad at a producer and threw that water bottle at a producer, not Ashley. In season 3, when Maddie forgot her solo and Abby is over there crying in the room when they're all confronting her, it is said that Abby was not crying because Maddie forgot her solo. Like, yes, she was upset about that, but it's also because she got upsetting news about her mom's health. And also in season 3, if you can remember, all the moms were quote unquote protesting for Kelly to come back to the team, so they weren't allowing their daughters to dance at all. And there was like a whole storyline where Melissa did allow her daughters to dance, and they were saying, oh, she's such a traitor, but it actually was because they were trying to negotiate better pay in their contracts. That is why they were protesting. They weren't protesting for Kelly in that sense. And again, in season 4, when Abby made fun of Chloe's eye, they heavily edited it to make it look like Abby was just saying how Chloe was a washed up dancer, which again is already bad and it's right. But no, she literally talked about her eye, and why they edited that out, I'm pretty sure was to protect her because they knew the backlash they would have probably gotten if that had aired in the first place. Also, something else that I want to talk about of how Dance Moms came off very scripted is that when Kathy had the candy apples in that first season, there were dancers that were actually a part of her company, but then after that, producers actually started bringing in other dancers to be a part of her company and to go against, you know, Abby, because basically she was already locked into a contract and she didn't want to use her own students. Therefore, they actually brought students in, and even you can tell like they even started making her do like her own version of a pyramid. So again, that just shows how the show can be very scripted. And then another thing is that they would either make the moms or the dancers say certain things in like the little sit down interviews they would do with them, so they could, you know, put it into the show as if they said something that they didn't say in that moment in that scene, or they could just be in a scene in general and just heavily edit it to look like certain reactions were going toward the scene or the storyline they wanted to go toward, or they would just take a clip out of a scene and put it into another scene simply. Because for example, Bryn talks about how in that scene where, you know, Ashley, I guess, calls Kendall like washed up, and then Kendall yells at her and says like, why are you so mean? Literally, if you watch that scene, they don't show Ashley actually saying it. They kind of cut from her. They have the little clip of her saying that thing about Kendall, and it goes back to her in the moment after she's saying something, so it looks like she's saying that one thing, but she's literally not. And the moms talked about how they would purposely say and do things to get them riled up for that day. And even Cameron talked about how they would threaten not to pay her mom if she didn't create drama. They were going to cut her pay and all these things, which is like, so what? Just now going back to the pyramid and to the dance competitions, so a lot of the moms and the dancers have talked about how when the show first started, the pyramid was never anything in Abby's studio. Now in the first season, they do say that the pyramid really did seem like it was based on how the girls were dancing, how they were, you know, taking instruction during that week. But as the show went on, the pyramid became again very heavily manipulated between Abby and the producers, because they talked about how sometimes pyramid would be like 5 hours, because sometimes Abby would be fighting with the producers as to the placement of who would be where during that pyramid week. And also based on Abby's, you know, placement on the pyramid, it was literally based on how your moms were acting most of the times. And if that mom, I guess, talked back to Abby or questioned Abby, she would then take it out on the kids. And also when it came to dance competitions, now the dance competitions were not fake, but just something interesting about them is that they would have to perform their routines twice, one for the judges and then the other time so, you know, the crew can get, you know, good shots of the dances for them to then put on air. And also just outright again, they were exploiting children. And the final point that I really have for this video is Dance Moms exposed reality TV, and not only of how heavily manipulated every storyline was, how heavily edited almost every scene was, but just seeing the conditions that these, you know, dancers were when they were kids is absolutely atrocious. The fact that they were basically locked into a predator contract is again absolutely atrocious. Because I remember when Christy had a podcast with Kelly and they were talking to one of the crew members, and they were talking about how like the producers would literally make them, you know, chase the kid around when they were over here crying and like put the little boom bap mic stick in their face. And it's just again so sad of how they wanted a drama filled show so bad that they literally exploited these kids. And then going back to how heavily scripted and edited it was, it's like, yes, you can get away with it not being scripted, but like once you heavily edit something and put sound bites in places that they don't belong to make a storyline look a certain way, or even to make a person look a certain way, it might as well be scripted. Like it's not real, it's not reality TV anymore. At that point, it really is scripted. And then also you have to think about how they're putting a target on these people's backs when they're portraying something as something that it's not, making a mom seem as mean when she's probably not even as mean, making a child seem quote unquote bratty when they're probably not. Maddie has talked about how she hated how she was seen as, you know, the quote unquote golden child, and how they really sometimes edited her to look like she was a brat. Because when you look at reality stars and the people that end up meeting them, a lot of them most of the time end up saying, oh my god, like you're really like nothing like you are on TV. And it's because that be so heavily edited and so manipulated. It's like, again, not only are you putting at risk the show's credibility, but you're also putting the cast members at risk. Like these are little teenagers who are watching. I don't doubt in my mind at all they're probably over here sending death threats to these moms and these kids in their comments, calling them every name in the book, all because again these people wanted a good show. And I'm very glad that a show like Dance Moms does not exist anymore, nor do I think it can exist, especially in today's climate, because people now have a brain and understand just how crazy it was to watch where we were watching. Again, especially the way that Abby was treating these kids. But I really do think that this show really, you know, it really put the spotlight on how manipulative reality TV can be, and how the industry as a whole really doesn't care if kids are being emotionally and mentally hurt at the end of the day, as long as they are getting good ratings. And I wonder if the producers just sit back sometimes and feel bad about the things they did, or they only cared about, you know, the monetary reward that they got from these kids. Because again, we live in a capitalist world where morals mean nothing unless your money is being messed with. So again, I just really am happy that a show like this does not exist, and that I hope that the reality TV industry does not ever try this again, and I hope that they learn from dance moms of how detrimental this can be to not only the mental health of the moms but also to the kids as well. Alright, you guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I would love to hear you guys' opinions in the comments. Remember to keep it respectful, and remember to always keep life cute, fab, and fun, and I will see you guys in the next video.